the symbol the origin and basis of human behavior. Leslie A. White. In July 1939, a celebration was held at Leland Stanford University to commemorate the 100th anniversary of the discovery that the cell is the basic unit of all living tissue. Today we are beginning to realize and to appreciate the fact that the symbol is the basic unit of all human behavior and civilization. All human behavior originates in the use of symbols. It was the symbol which transformed our anthropoid ancestors into men and made them human. All civilizations have been generated, and are perpetuated, only by the use of symbols. It is the symbol which transforms an infant of Homo sapiens into a human being. Deaf mutes who grow up without the use of symbols are not human beings. All human behavior consists of, or is dependent upon, the use of symbols. Human behavior is symbolic behavior. Symbolic behavior is human behavior. The symbol is the universe of humanity. The great Darwin declared that there is no fundamental difference between man and the higher mammals in their mental faculties, that the difference between them consists solely in man's almost infinitely larger power of associating together the most diversified sounds and ideas. Ch. 3, The Descent of Man. Thus the difference between the mind of man and that of other mammals is merely one of degree, and it is not fundamental. Essentially the same views are held by many present-day students of human behavior. Professor Ralph Linton, an anthropologist, writes in The Study of Man, the differences between men and animals in all these behavior respects are enormous, but they seem to be differences in quantity rather than in quality, pages 79. The same idea is also expressed on p. 68. Human and animal behavior can be shown to have so much in common, Professor Linton observes, that the gap between them ceases to be of great importance, pages 60. Dr. Alexander Goldenweiser, likewise an anthropologist, believes that in point of sheer psychology, mind as such, man is after all no more than a talented animal, and that the difference between the mentality here displayed by a horse and a chimpanzee and that of man is merely one of degree. 2. That there are numerous and impressive similarities between the behavior of man and that of ape is fairly obvious. It is quite possible that even chimpanzees in zoos have noted and appreciated them. Fairly apparent, too, are man's behavioral similarities to many other kinds of animals. Almost as obvious, but not easy to define, is a difference in behavior which distinguishes man from all other living creatures. I say obvious because it is quite apparent to the common man that the non-human animals with which he is familiar do not and cannot enter, and participate in, the world in which he, as a human being, lives. It is impossible for a dog, horse, bird, or even an ape, ever to have any understanding of the meaning of the sign of the cross to a Christian, or of the fact that black-white among the Chinese is the color of mourning. But when the scholar attempts to define the mental difference between animal and man, he sometimes encounters difficulties which he cannot surmount and, therefore, ends up by saying that the difference is merely one of degree. Man has a bigger mind, larger power of association, wider range of activities, etc. 3. There is a fundamental difference between the mind of man and the mind of non-man. This difference is one of kind, not one of degree. And the gap between the two types is of the greatest importance, at least to the science of comparative behavior. Man uses symbols. No other creature does. A creature either uses symbols or he does not. There are no intermediate stages. 3. A symbol is a thing the value or meaning of which is bestowed upon it by those who use it. I say thing because a symbol may have any kind of physical form. It may have the form of a material object, a color, a sound, an odor, a motion of an object, a taste. The meaning, or value, of a symbol is in no instance derived from or determined by properties intrinsic in its physical form. The color appropriate to mourning may be yellow, green, or any other color. Purple need not be the color of royalty. Among the Manchu rulers of China it was yellow. The meaning of the word "see" is not intrinsic in its phonetic or pictorial properties. Biting one's thumb at someone might mean anything. The meanings of symbols are derived from and determined by the organisms who use them. Meaning is bestowed by human organisms upon physical forms which thereupon become symbols. 5. All symbols must have a physical form, otherwise they could not enter our experience. 6. But the meaning of a symbol cannot be perceived by the senses. One cannot tell by looking at an X in an algebraic equation what it stands for. One cannot ascertain with the ears alone the symbolic value of the phonetic compound C. One cannot tell merely by weighing a pig how much gold he will exchange for. One cannot tell from the wavelength of a color whether it stands for courage or cowardice, stop or go. Nor can one discover the spirit in a fetish by any amount of physical or chemical examination. The meaning of a symbol can be communicated only by symbolic means, usually by articulate speech. But a thing which in one context is a symbol is, in another context, not a symbol but a sign. Thus, a word is a symbol only when one is concerned with the distinction between its meaning and its physical form. This distinction must be made when one bestows value upon a sound combination or when a previously bestowed value is discovered for the first time. It may be made at other times for certain purposes. But after value has been bestowed upon, or discovered in, a word, its meaning becomes identified, in use, with its physical form. The word then functions as a sign, 7 rather than as a symbol. Its meaning is then perceived with the senses. This fact that a thing may be both symbol in one context and non-symbol in another context has led to some confusion and misunderstanding. Thus Darwin says that which distinguishes man from the lower animals is not the understanding of articulate sounds, for as everyone knows, dogs understand many words and sentences, ch 3, the descent of man. It is perfectly true, of course, that dogs, apes, horses, birds, and perhaps creatures even lower in the evolutionary scale, can be taught to respond in a specific way to a vocal command. But it does not follow that no difference exists between the meaning of words and sentences to a man and to a dog. Words are both signs and symbols to man. They are merely signs to a dog. Let us analyze the situation of vocal stimulus and response. A dog may be taught to roll over at the command roll over. A man may be taught to stop at the command halt. The fact that a dog can be taught to roll over in Chinese, or that he can be taught to go fetch at the command roll over and, of course, the same is true for a man shows that there is no necessary and invariable relationship between a particular sound combination and a specific reaction to it. The dog or the man can be taught to respond in a certain manner to any arbitrarily selected combination of sounds, for example, a group of nonsense syllables, coined for the occasion. On the other hand, any one of a great number and variety of responses may become evocable by a given stimulus. Thus, so far as the origin of the relationship between vocal stimulus and response is concerned, the nature of the relationship, i.e., the meaning of the stimulus, is not determined by properties intrinsic in the stimulus. But, once the relationship has been established between vocal stimulus and response, the meaning of the stimulus becomes identified with the sounds. It is then as if the meaning were intrinsic in the sounds themselves. Thus, halt does not have the same meaning as hilt or malt. A dog may be conditioned to respond in a certain way to a sound of a given wavelength. Sufficiently alter the pitch of the sound and the response will cease to be forthcoming. The meaning of the stimulus has become identified with its physical form. Its value is perceived with the senses. Thus we see that in establishing a relationship between a stimulus and a response, the properties intrinsic in the stimulus do not determine the nature of the response. But, after the relationship has been established, the meaning of the stimulus is as if it were inherent in its physical form. It does not make any difference what phonetic combination we select to evoke the response of terminating self-locomotion. We may teach a dog, horse, or man to stop at any vocal command we care to choose or devise. But once the relationship has been established between sound and response, the meaning of the stimulus becomes identified with its physical form and is, therefore, perceivable with the senses. So far we have discovered no difference between the dog and the man. They appear to be exactly alike. And so they are as far as we have gone. But we have not told the whole story yet. No difference between dog and man is discoverable so far as learning to respond appropriately to a vocal stimulus is concerned. But we must not let an impressive similarity conceal an important difference. A porpoise is not yet a fish. The man differs from the dog and all other creatures in that he can and does play an active role in determining what value the vocal stimulus is to have, and the dog cannot. As John Locke has aptly put it, all sounds i.e., in language have their signification from the arbitrary imposition of men. The dog does not and cannot play an active part in determining the value of the vocal stimulus. Whether he is to roll over or go fetch at a given stimulus, or whether the stimulus for roll over be one combination of sounds or another, is a matter in which the dog has nothing whatever to say. He plays a purely passive role and can do nothing else. He learns the meaning of a vocal command just as his salivary glands may learn to respond to the sound of a bell. But man plays an active role and thus becomes a creator. Let X equal 3 pounds of coal and it does equal 3 pounds of coal. Let removal of the hat in a house of worship indicate respect and it becomes so. This creative faculty, that a freely, actively, and arbitrarily bestowing value upon things, is one of the most commonplace as well as the most important characteristic of man. Children employ it freely in their play. Let's pretend that this rock is a wolf. The difference between the behavior of man and other animals then, is that the lower animals may receive new values, may acquire new meanings, but they cannot create and bestow them. Only man can do this. To use a crude analogy, lower animals are like a person who has only the receiving apparatus for wireless messages. He can receive messages but cannot send them. Man can do both. and this difference is one of kind, not of degree. A creature can either arbitrarily impose signification, to use Locke's phrase, can either create and bestow values, or he cannot. There are no intermediate stages. Point 9. This difference may appear slight, but, as a carpenter once told William James in discussing differences between men, it's very important. All human existence depends upon it and it alone. The confusion regarding the nature of words and their significance to men and the lower animals is not hard to understand. It arises, first of all, from a failure to distinguish between the two quite different contexts in which words function. The statements, the meaning of a word O cannot be perceived with the senses, and the meaning of a word can be perceived with the senses, though contradictory, are nevertheless equally true. In the symbol context the meaning cannot be perceived with the senses. In the sign context it can. This is confusing enough. But the situation has been made worse by using the words symbol and sign to label, not the different contexts, but one and the same thing, the word. Thus a word is a symbol and a sign, two different things. It is like saying that a vase is a dolly and a canna, two different things, because it may function in two contexts, aesthetic and commercial. That which is a symbol in the context of origination becomes a sign in use thereafter. Things may be either signs or symbols to man. They can be only signs to other creatures. Very little indeed is known of the organic basis of the symbolic faculty. We know next to nothing of the neurology of symbolizing. Point 1-2 and very few scientists, anatomists, neurologists, physical anthropologists appear to be interested in the problem. Some, in fact, seem to be unaware of the existence of such a problem. The duty and task of giving an account of the organic basis of symbolizing does not fall within the province of the sociologist or the cultural anthropologist. On the contrary, he should scrupulously exclude it as irrelevant to his problems and interests. To introduce it would bring only confusion. It is enough for the sociologist or cultural anthropologist to take the ability to use symbols, possessed by man alone, as given. The use to which he puts this fact is in no way affected by his, or even the anatomist's, inability to describe the symbolic process in neurological terms. However, it is well for the social scientist to be acquainted with the little that neurologists and anatomists do know about the structural basis of symboling. We, therefore, review briefly the chief relevant facts here. The anatomist has not been able to discover why men can use symbols and apes cannot. So far as is known, the only difference between the brain of man and the brain of an ape is a quantitative one. Man has no new kinds of brain cells or brain cell connections, A.J. Carlson, opposite. Nor does man, as distinguished from other animals, possess a specialized symbol mechanism. The so-called speech areas of the brain should not be identified with symbolizing. These areas are associated with the muscles of the tongue, larynx, etc. But symbolizing is not dependent upon these organs. One may symbolize with the fingers, the feet, or with any part of the body that can be moved at will when, to be sure, the symbolic faculty was brought into existence by the natural processes of organic evolution. And we may reasonably believe that the focal point, if not the locus, of this faculty is in the brain, especially the forebrain. Man's brain is much larger than that of an ape, both absolutely and relatively. 1-4 and the forebrain especially is large in man as compared with ape. Now in many situations we know that quantitative changes give rise to qualitative differences. Water is transformed into steam by additional quantities of heat. Additional power and speed lift the taxiing airplane from the ground and transform terrestrial locomotion into flight. The difference between wood alcohol and grain alcohol is a qualitative expression of a quantitative difference in the proportions of carbon and hydrogen. Thus a marked growth in size of the brain in man may have brought forth a new kind of function. All culture civilization depends upon the symbol. It was the exercise of the symbolic faculty that brought culture into existence, and it is the use of symbols that makes the perpetuation of culture possible. Without the symbol there would be no culture, and man would be merely an animal, not a human being. Articulate speech is the most important form of symbolic expression. Remove speech from culture and what would remain? Let us see. Without articulate speech we would have no human social organization. Families we might have, but this form of organization is not peculiar to man. It is not per se human. But we would have no prohibitions of incest, no rules prescribing exogamy and endogamy, polygamy or monogamy. How could marriage with a cross cousin be prescribed, marriage with a parallel cousin prescribed, without articulate speech? How could rules which prohibit plural mates possess simultaneously but permit them if possessed one at a time, exist without speech? Without speech we would have no political, economic, ecclesiastic, or military organization. No codes of etiquette or ethics. No laws. No science, theology, or literature. No games or music, except on an ape level. Rituals and ceremonial paraphernalia would be meaningless without articulate speech. Indeed, without articulate speech we would be all but toolless. We would have only the occasional and insignificant use of the tools such as we find today among the higher apes, for it was articulate speech that transformed the non-progressive tool-using of the ape into the progressive, cumulative tool-using of man, the human being. In short, without symbolic communication in some form, we would have no culture. In the word was the beginning of culture and its perpetuation also. 15 To be sure, with all his culture man is still an animal and strives for the same ends that all other living creatures strive for: the preservation of the individual and the perpetuation of the race. In concrete terms these ends are food, shelter from the elements, defense from enemies, health, and offspring. The fact that man strives for these ends just as all other animals do has, no doubt, led many to declare that there is no fundamental difference between the behavior of man and of other creatures. But man does differ, not in ends but in means. Man's means are cultural means. Culture is simply the human animal's way of living. And, since these means, culture, are dependent upon a faculty possessed by man alone, the ability to use symbols, the difference between the behavior of man and of all other creatures is not merely great, but basic and fundamental. The behavior of man is of two distinct kinds: symbolic and non-symbolic. Man yawns, stretches, coughs, scratches himself, cries out in pain, shrinks with fear, bristles with anger, and so on. Non-symbolic behavior of this sort is not peculiar to man. He shares it not only with other primates but with many other animal species as well. But man communicates with his fellows with articulate speech, uses amulets, confesses sins, makes laws, observes codes of etiquette, explains his dreams, classifies his relatives in designated categories, and so on. This kind of behavior is unique. Only man is capable of it. It is peculiar to man because it consists of, or is dependent upon, the use of symbols. The non-symbolic behavior of man is the behavior of man the animal. The symbolic behavior is that of man the human being. 16. It is the symbol which has transformed man from a mere animal to a human animal. As it was the symbol that made mankind human, so it is with each member of the race. A baby is not a human being so far as his behavior is concerned. Until the infant acquires speech, there is nothing to distinguish his behavior qualitatively from that of a young ape. 17. The baby becomes a human being when and as he learns to use symbols. Only by means of speech can the baby enter and take part in the human affairs of mankind. The questions we asked previously may be repeated now. How is the growing child to know of such things as families, etiquette, morals, law, science, philosophy, religion, commerce, and so on, without speech? The rare cases of children who grow up without symbols because of deafness and blindness, such as those of Laura Bridgman, Helen Keller and Marie Herden, are instructive. Until they got the idea of symbolic communication, they were not human beings, but animals. They did not participate in behavior which is peculiar to human beings. They were in human society as dogs are, but they were not of human society. And, although the present writer is exceedingly skeptical of the reports of the so-called wolf children, feral men, etc., we may note that they are described, almost without exception, as without speech, beastly, and inhuman. 7. Summary. The natural processes of organic evolution brought into existence in man, and man alone, a new and distinctive ability, the ability to use symbols. The most important form of symbolic expression is articulate speech. Articulate speech means communication of ideas. Communication means preservation, tradition, and preservation means accumulation and progress. The emergence of the organic faculty of symbol using has resulted in the genesis of a new order of phenomena, a superorganic, or cultural, order. All civilizations are born of, and are perpetuated by, the use of symbols. A culture, or civilization, is but a particular kind of form symbolic which the biologic, life-perpetuating activities of a particular animal, man, assume. Human behavior is symbolic behavior. If it is not symbolic, it is not human. The infant of the genus Homo becomes a human being only as he is introduced into and participates in that superorganic order of phenomena which is culture. And the key to this world and the means of participation in it is the symbol. Leslie White. The symbol